Robert, a young landlord in the concrete jungle of New York City, was filled with optimism. He had just rented out his prized studio condo to Rebecca. She was a young professional. She had a stable job, a hefty savings, and she had excellent references. What more could a landlord ask for? Robert felt a surge of hope. He was finally living the American landlord dream. The first few months were like a dream. Rebecca paid her rent on time. She kept the apartment tidy. She even sent Robert a thank you note for being such a great landlord. Robert was over the moon. This was proof that good tenants still existed. He had hit the jackpot with Rebecca. Life was good. Robert was even about to expand his real estate portfolio. Then, unexpectedly, the pandemic happened in 2020. The city announced an eviction moratorium. Landlords were barred from evicting tenants who couldn't pay rent. With the fear looming from other landlords, Robert felt confident that Rebecca would continue paying her rent because of her hefty savings account she had shown him. Robert understood the need to protect tenants. Unbeknownst to him, Rebecca had a dark secret that would soon be uncovered. Robert received a call from Rebecca. Her voice was filled with panic. She had lost her savings due to identity theft, but reassured Robert that everything was being taken care of and the authorities were involved. A week later, she called Robert again. This call sent shivers down Robert's spine. Rebecca expressed how she lost her job due to the pandemic and was not able to pay her rent. She pleaded with Robert for understanding. Rebecca promised to pay as much as she could. She assured him that she would catch up once she got back on her feet. Robert's heart sank. He knew he had a moral obligation to help. He remembered his own struggles. He had been a struggling student once. He knew what it was like to worry about making rent. But something seemed wrong. For two hardships to impact Rebecca one after another was unheard of. Even with this unsettling feeling, Robert decided to be lenient with Rebecca. It was the right thing to do. Robert agreed to a reduced rent payment plan. Rebecca was grateful. She promised to be out of his hair soon. Robert felt a sense of relief. He was doing his part to help someone in need. Little did he know that his troubles were just beginning. With the next month's rent due, Robert reached out to Rebecca. Before he could greet Rebecca, she answered in a chilling voice, "I told you I will pay you," and hung up the phone. Chills ran down Robert's spine. Rebecca's voice was different. Gone was the cheery, familiar tone he had grown used to. Instead, her voice was flat, off. Something about it didn't feel right. A chill crept up Robert's spine. Baffled, he pulled his phone away from his ear, staring at the screen. Same number, same contact. But was it really the same person? His pulse quickened as he hit redial. His calls went straight to voicemail. His texts were unanswered. Maybe she was in a bad mood with all of her financial struggles, he thought. He waited 2 more days to see if Rebecca would make her payment. When the day came, she didn't. A knot of worry began to tighten in his chest. Robert's own finances were starting to feel the strain. The mortgage payments on the apartment didn't stop. The property taxes didn't disappear. He had his own bills to pay. Robert relied on the rental income to manage his expenses. With Rebecca not paying or answering her phone, his financial stability was hanging by a thread. He tried to stay optimistic. He reminded himself that this was just a temporary setback. He told himself that Rebecca would eventually come around. Deep down, though, a seed of doubt had been sown. Was he being too lenient? Was he being taken advantage of? Robert lived a few blocks away from his rental property. He would often walk by to check on the building. One evening, as he was passing by, he bumped into Linda, an elderly resident. Linda had lived in the building for decades. She had seen it all. Linda, with a concerned look on her face, pulled Robert aside. She told him about the unusual activity she had noticed at his apartment. Late at night, she would constantly hear male raspy voices and dark music around 3 a.m. The evil sounds would keep her up at night. Robert's blood ran cold. What was Rebecca doing? And why were there male voices in the apartment? Something wasn't right. Determined to find out, Robert went to the apartment that evening. As he reached the door, his nose wrinkled at the smell. A thick, musky odor seeped through the cracks. Smoky incense mixed with something else, something foul. His gut twisted. What the hell was going on? Hesitant but firm, he knocked on the door. To his surprise, a man answered. Robert froze. Who was this? Where was Rebecca? Peering inside, his eyes darted around the apartment. The atmosphere was different. The air felt heavy. Wrong. He forced himself to speak. I'm looking for Rebecca. The man stared at him, expression unreadable. And then, in a voice too calm, too cold, he said, Rebecca doesn't live here. Before Robert could respond, the man moved to close the door, but not before Robert caught a glimpse of something deeply unsettling. The walls were covered in paper, sheets taped haphazardly, each filled with frantic, erratic handwriting. One phrase repeated over and over. Remember, the voices aren't real. A chill crawled up Robert's spine. His hair stood on end. His heart pounded. What was he dealing with? Who was this man? And where the hell was Rebecca? Back home, Robert couldn't sleep. He spent the night pacing, thoughts racing. What should he do? By morning, his patience had run out. He grabbed his phone and dialed Rebecca. Straight to voicemail. He tried again. This time her phone was off. Robert's frustration boiled over into fury. He had a stranger living in his home, and the one person he thought he could trust had vanished. Desperate for answers, he rummaged through his files, digging out the documents Rebecca had submitted during the lease agreement. He found the phone number and the business address she had listed as her employer. He called. The number she had given him also turned off. Robert's pulse pounded in his ears. With shaking hands, he pulled up Google and searched the address. It was a real business. At least, that part was true. He found their listed phone number and called. This time, someone answered. Robert took a breath, steadying himself. I'm looking for Rebecca. The line went silent. Then a voice, flat, distant. Who's Rebecca? There's no Rebecca here. There had never been a Rebecca at the Midtown New York City company. Richard was beside himself with rage. His hands clenched into fists. His pulse pounded in his ears. He had been scammed, lied to, manipulated. He wanted to storm back to his apartment and drag that man out himself. But he knew he couldn't. Not legally. With COVID eviction moratoriums still in place, he couldn't even get a court date. Months passed without rent being paid. The squatter remained, untouched by the law. Richard consulted an attorney, but the answer was always the same. There was nothing to be done. The helplessness boiled inside him. Rage surged through his veins. He was ready to take matters into his own hands. Then his phone rang. An unknown number. Richard nearly ignored it, but something told him to answer. The voice on the other end was frantic. A woman speaking fast. Her name was familiar, but different. When the woman realized she had finally found him, a sigh of relief broke through the panic in her voice. To Richard's shock, the caller claimed to be his tenant's sister. And then came the truth. The woman Richard had known as Rebecca had never been Rebecca at all. Her real name was Abigail, and she had a dark secret. She wasn't just a fraud. She was a master manipulator, a woman with a history of dissociative identity disorder. She had stolen her sister Rebecca's identity, using her social security number, bank accounts, and personal information to sign a lease with Richard. And then she subleased the apartment to someone she knew, for profit. She had chosen Richard's property deliberately. With New York's strict tenant protections, she knew exactly how hard it would be to get an eviction. Richard's mind reeled. His stomach churned. He had heard horror stories about real estate scams, but he never imagined he'd become one. How had he let this happen? And more importantly, what was he supposed to do now? With the real Rebecca on the phone, they both agreed to terminate the fraudulent lease agreement. She apologized profusely on behalf of her sinister sister, acknowledging the damage caused. Though thousands of dollars were lost in rent, Richard finally saw a glimpse of relief, an end to at least one part of his nightmare. But another problem remained. There was still a squatter in his apartment. And until Richard got the unknown man out, the nightmare was far from over. After his phone call with the real Rebecca, his mind raced through strategies, each more determined than the last. He couldn't shake the feeling that this apartment, his sanctuary, was a part of him, and he'd stop at nothing to reclaim it. Whether it meant negotiating with cold bureaucracy or facing the people responsible head-on, he was prepared. He knew the battle would be tough, but something deep within told him that this was a fight worth having. He rushed to his apartment, heart pounding, ready to reclaim what was his. As he reached for the door, he froze. It was already open, just slightly. A nervous breath escaped him as he pushed it wider. The hinges creaked, breaking the heavy silence. Inside, the apartment was empty, but wrong. Everything was too neat, too deliberate, not ransacked, not abandoned. The air was stale, as if someone had been here just moments ago but left without a trace. The kitchen light flickered, casting erratic shadows along the walls, and then he saw it, the writing. Scrawled across the living room walls in uneven, frantic strokes. "The owner watches me, but they don't see. Not yet." The words crawled over the paint, sinking into the space like a whispered secret. His stomach turned. Was the squatter gone? Or were they still watching? Frantic and unsettled, Richard seized the opportunity. With the squatter finally gone, he wasted no time. He called a locksmith and changed the locks immediately. He had no idea what kind of twisted, sinister things Abigail and that unknown man had been up to. And he didn't want to find out. For the first time in months, he felt a sigh of relief. The nightmare was finally over. But the damage had already been done. The stress, the deception, the sheer helplessness, it had all taken its toll. Richard had seen enough. Enough of being a landlord. Enough of New York City brutal tenant laws. With no hesitation, he made his decision. He was selling the condo. This city had given him one real estate horror story too many. It was time to move on.